They tied her to a post and laughed as beasts tore at her legs, until one human stepped forward. Towering trees with silver leaves swayed in the wind, casting shadows that danced across the forest floor. Strange creatures moved through the underbrush, some graceful and harmless, others sharp-eyed and territorial. Humans had only just begun to colonize Kestrel 9, and every day was a test of survival, skill, and patience. She had been on a research mission alone, collecting samples of luminous plants that grew only in the deepest valleys, when the trap was set. At first, she didn't notice the signs. A slight disturbance in the leaf litter, the faint crunch of undergrowth behind her, the sudden silence of the birds. Ilara was an expert at reading these things. Her instincts screamed danger, but before she could react, ropes flew around her wrists and ankles, pulling her backward. "Got you!" a voice hissed, rough and mocking. Ilara struggled against the bindings, but the ropes were made of synthetic fibers stronger than anything she had seen on Earth. She was pulled to a clearing she hadn't seen before, a circular patch surrounded by dense ferns and glowing fungi that made the air shimmer with faint light. At the center of the clearing stood a crude wooden post, and before she could resist, her captors tied her to it. "You think you're clever wandering alone in the forest," one of them said, his tone filled with amusement. "Let's see how clever you are when the locals pay a visit." Ilara's heart pounded, but she refused to panic. She had learned long ago that fear could kill faster than any predator. She kept her mind sharp, studying her surroundings. The rogue colonists who had captured her were a dangerous lot. They had no loyalty to the colony, no concern for the rules or safety. They wanted profit, and they used the planet's dangers as weapons to intimidate anyone who opposed them. From the shadows, she could hear faint sounds, clicking, rustling, and a low, growling hum. The forest seemed to come alive around the clearing. The beasts her captors had summoned were not ordinary animals. Kestrel 9 was home to creatures that had evolved over millions of years to survive in the dense alien forests. They were fast, clever, and territorial. And now they were curious. Ilara's mind raced. She had studied Kestrel 9's wildlife extensively. She knew these creatures weren't mindless killers. They responded to sound, movement, and patterns. If she could remain calm, observe them carefully, and communicate subtly, she might be able to influence their behavior. The first beast appeared at the edge of the clearing. It was smaller than she expected, with luminous eyes that reflected the forest's faint light. Its legs were long and spindly, ending in clawed feet, but it moved with a grace that was almost hypnotic. It sniffed the air, tilting its head as if trying to understand the strange new presence in its territory. Ilara noticed the way it paused after every few steps, scanning the clearing carefully. She remembered the patterns from her research. These creatures were curious but cautious. They responded to sounds in a certain range, and they avoided sudden movements unless provoked. The rogue colonists laughed, thinking that fear would paralyze her. One of them whistled, and the beast's ears twitched. Another tossed a rock nearby. The creature recoiled, but it did not attack. Ilara felt a surge of hope. They had underestimated her understanding of the planet. She began to hum softly, a pattern of notes she had used to calm creatures during her research. The sound was low and steady, almost like a rhythm of the forest itself. The beast tilted its head, ears twitching again. Slowly it stepped closer, but its movements were cautious, almost respectful. Ilara kept her voice steady. She could feel the ropes digging into her wrists, but she focused on the creature, not the pain. One by one, other beasts appeared. Some were larger, their bodies covered in scales that glimmered in the dim light. Others had wings, folded neatly against their sides. They circled the clearing, observing the humans with intelligence in their glowing eyes. The rogue colonists began to panic. "They're circling us," one shouted. "Keep them back." Ilara saw an opportunity. She had learned that these creatures could be guided using patterns of sound and light. The glowing fungi around the clearing pulsed faintly, responding to vibrations in the air. If she could time her hums with the subtle flashes of light, she might be able to create a signal the beasts would recognize. Her mind worked quickly. She adjusted her hums, making them rise and fall like the wind through the trees. The creatures paused, their heads tilting as they tried to understand the strange pattern. Slowly, they shifted their attention away from her legs, focusing on the rhythm she produced. One of the larger beasts, a quadruped with shimmering scales and long, delicate tendrils, stepped forward. Its eyes locked onto her, and for a moment she felt the raw intelligence in its gaze. It wasn't hungry. It wasn't angry. It was curious, and that was exactly what she needed. Suddenly, from the tree line, a figure moved. Alara barely had time to notice before the stranger stepped into the clearing. A human, but different from the colonists who had captured her. He was calm, measured, and confident. His name, she would later learn, was Kale. Kale carried a small device that emitted pulses of light and sound. He didn't run. He didn't shout. He analyzed the creatures, the colonists, and the environment in a way that made Alara's heart beat faster. He understood the forest. He understood the beasts, and he understood her. The rogue colonists were distracted by the presence of the stranger, unsure whether he was friend or foe. The beasts, too, paused, sensing the new energy in the clearing. Alara took a deep breath and continued her humming, adjusting the pitch to match the subtle pulses from Kale's device. The largest beast hesitated, then stepped back, as if acknowledging that Alara and the stranger were not threats. The others followed, their curiosity turning into cautious observation. Alara's hands were still tied, but she felt a spark of hope. She could see the panic in the colonists' eyes. They had thought they could intimidate her, use the planet's wildlife as a weapon. But she was not helpless, and now, with Kale stepping forward, the balance was beginning to shift. She allowed herself a small smile. Survival on Kestrel 9 had always required courage, intelligence, and patience, and she had all three. The first part of the battle was won, not through strength, not through weapons, but through understanding, observation, and the quiet determination that humans had carried across the stars. As the creatures watched, the colonists began to argue, pointing at the beasts and each other, realizing that their plan was unraveling. Alara's mind raced ahead. She would need to free herself completely. She would need to communicate more clearly with the creatures. And she would need Kale's help. But for now, the clearing was hers, in a sense, reclaimed by human ingenuity and calm courage. The forest seemed to exhale around them. The beasts, once threatening, now seemed almost protective. Alara could feel their intelligence brushing against her own, as if acknowledging that humans, too, could adapt, survive, and even lead on this strange, alien world. She glanced at Kale. He nodded slightly, a silent agreement that they were on the same side. Together, they would turn the tide. Together, they would face the rogue colonists and the challenges of Kestrel 9, and they would win. For the first time since the trap had been set, Alara felt the surge of true hope. Survival, after all, was only the beginning. On Kestrel 9, humans had the chance to thrive, to outthink, outsmart, and outlast any challenge. And she would do exactly that. The clearing was quiet now, the tension hanging like mist over the ground. The beasts had not attacked. The colonists were uncertain. And Alara, tied to the post but far from defeated, began to plan her next move. The battle for control of the clearing, and perhaps the planet, had only just begun. Alara had barely a moment to breathe. The clearing seemed calm now, but she knew better. Kestrel 9's forests were full of surprises, and calm often meant that danger was gathering. She still hung tied to the post, but her mind raced, spinning strategies faster than her heart beat. Every detail of the surroundings mattered. The patterns of the glowing fungi, the way the beasts moved, even the wind that whispered through the silver leaves, all could be used to her advantage. Kale, the stranger who had stepped forward, crouched a few meters away. His eyes scanned the clearing and the surrounding forest simultaneously. He didn't speak much, but Alara felt his awareness like a shield around them. He had a device strapped to his wrist, a small, sleek machine that pulsed softly with lights. She had never seen anything like it, but from the way the beasts responded, she could tell it was designed to influence them in some way. The rogue colonists, however, were still a serious threat. They hadn't expected anyone else to intervene. They had thought the creatures would do their work, scare her, or perhaps injure her just enough to teach her a lesson. Their laughter had stopped now, replaced by muttering and nervous glances. One of them stepped closer to her, trying to intimidate her with his presence. "You're not going anywhere, little engineer," he sneered. "These creatures will make sure of that, even if someone tries to help you." He glanced at Kale, uncertainty in his voice. "It won't matter." Alara's hands flexed within the tight ropes, and she forced herself to remain calm. Panic would do nothing. What would help was thinking, observing, and exploiting every advantage. She noticed the first clue immediately. The beasts were cautious but curious. The larger quadrupeds had long tendrils that twitched whenever the colonists made sudden moves. The winged creatures perched in the trees were watching too, their sharp eyes following every motion. She hummed again, softly, in a slow, rhythmic pattern. Her voice was barely audible, but she carefully matched it to the pulses from Kale's device. The largest quadruped tilted its head and stepped closer, its limbs moving carefully over the uneven ground. She caught its attention fully, and for a brief moment she and the beast seemed to communicate in a language older than words, one of awareness, caution, and trust. The rogue colonists noticed this change. "Why isn't it attacking her?" one yelled. Panic was creeping into their voices now. "What did she do?" Alara kept her focus. It wasn't magic, it was knowledge, observation, intelligence. That was humanity's edge, an edge that she intended to use. She studied the creature's patterns carefully. The winged ones were protective of their nests in the trees, while the quadrupeds were territorial and sensitive to vibrations in the ground. By controlling subtle sounds and motions, she could guide their behavior without threatening them. Kale moved closer to her, signaling with a small hand gesture that he was ready to act. He held a small, probe-like device, capable of emitting vibrations and soft lights in frequencies that the creatures recognized. Alara understood immediately that he was waiting for her signal. Together, they could coordinate a plan, even while she remained tied to the post. The rogue colonists, sensing the shift in control, began to scatter slightly, trying to maintain dominance over her and the beasts. One of them, bolder than the rest, stepped forward with a stick raised, hoping to frighten the quadrupeds. The creatures reacted immediately, not with aggression but with defensive movements. The largest quadruped reared slightly, its tendrils waving, while the winged ones swooped down to a lower branch, their eyes glowing brighter. Alara seized the moment. She adjusted her hum, a subtle rise and fall in pitch that mimicked the vibrations Kale's device was producing. The beasts tilted their heads, paused, and then moved closer toward the humans, but not in attack. They were observing, testing, evaluating. It was a dance of intelligence, one that humans had initiated without a single violent strike. Kale activated the device briefly, sending a pulse that caused the fungi around the clearing to shimmer in a soft, rhythmic glow. The creatures reacted instantly, responding to the signal with trust rather than fear. Alara felt a surge of hope. They were listening to her. They were following her lead. The rogue colonists panicked. Back off, you stupid animals," one shouted. But the beasts didn't move toward him. They were too focused on the signals from Alara and Kale. That confusion gave her a tiny advantage. She flexed her hands and feet, testing the ropes. One of the bindings around her wrist was looped loosely enough that she could work on it, slowly and carefully, without alerting her captors. While she worked, she observed the clearing. Fallen branches could be used as leverage, rocks as obstacles. The creatures themselves could be guided subtly to form barriers if necessary. Every element of the environment was a tool. Every movement could be calculated. Alara felt the familiar thrill of strategy building in real time, the spark of human ingenuity that had driven explorers, scientists, and engineers across the galaxy. Kale noticed her progress. He crouched slightly closer to the rogue colonists, keeping his device active but moving carefully so as not to provoke them. His eyes flicked to Alara, silently asking if she was ready. She nodded subtly. Together, they were forming a plan. One of the quadrupeds moved to a position between her and the nearest colonist, lowering its head and spreading its limbs in a subtle warning stance. It wasn't attacking, but it was clear. Any sudden move by the colonist could provoke the creature. The rogue, sensing the risk, hesitated. Alara took a deep breath and concentrated on her next hum. She raised her voice just enough to create a clear pattern that the creatures could understand. She had observed this behavior in the field before. Patterns of sound could guide Kestrel 9's wildlife and in some cases even protect humans from harm. She trusted her instincts and her experience. Kale activated the device again, sending another pulse in sync with her humming. The effect was immediate. The largest quadrupeds lowered their bodies, not in aggression but in readiness. The winged ones fluttered slightly, signaling awareness but not alarm. The rogue colonists realized too late that the balance of power had shifted. Alara focused on the ropes. One, then another, began to loosen under her careful, persistent movements. She timed her efforts with the creature's subtle repositioning. Each movement was calculated. Each hum reinforced the rhythm, guiding the beasts away from her legs, away from the danger she had once feared. The rogue colonists started arguing among themselves, their unity collapsing under stress. "We have to get her," one shouted. We can't let her control them. Another shook his head, panic overtaking pride. The creatures, sensing the humans' disarray, moved in patterns that blocked the colonists from approaching further. Alara's confidence grew with every pulse, every hum, every careful twist of the ropes. Then Kale moved closer, silently, signaling for her to act. She flexed her hands again and twisted, working free the last binding around her wrist. A small pop, almost inaudible over the forest sounds, told her she had succeeded. Her first hand was free. Carefully, she began working on the second, all while maintaining her humming pattern. The rogue colonists were now fully distracted, their attention divided between the creatures and Alara's subtle manipulations. Kale continued to pulse the device, his timing perfect, reinforcing her patterns. The quadrupeds moved in a careful formation, almost as if protecting her progress, guiding the humans' attention away from her hands. Finally, with a precise twist and pull, Alara freed her second wrist. Her hands were free for the first time since the trap had been set. She didn't rush. She remained calm, waiting for the exact moment. Her first action would be to ensure the creatures were completely aligned with her intent, not just reacting to fear or curiosity. The creatures, now fully attentive, seemed to respond to her signals with understanding. The quadrupeds shifted slightly, positioning themselves as silent guardians. The winged creatures perched closer, their eyes gleaming with awareness. Alara felt a surge of exhilaration. This was what humans did best: think, plan, and act even under pressure. Survival was never just about strength, it was about intellect, adaptability, and courage. The rogue colonists finally realized that they were losing control. Their confidence had evaporated, replaced by confusion and fear. They glanced at each other, unsure of what to do next. Any sudden move could provoke the creatures, but waiting seemed equally dangerous. Alara's mind raced ahead. She had the advantage now. Her hands were free. The creatures were on her side. Kale was ready, and the rogue colonists were panicking. The clearing was a chessboard, and every piece was in motion. Her first thought was simple: neutralize the immediate threat without harm. She didn't want to hurt the creatures, or the humans if she could avoid it. But she would assert control, showing that human intelligence and strategy could overcome fear, aggression, and raw strength. Alara and Kale exchanged a glance, silent communication that needed no words. It was time. The creatures were ready. The rogue colonists were about to discover that humans were not to be underestimated. In that moment, Alara felt the truth of it. Humans could thrive anywhere. On Kestrel 9 or any other planet, survival was not about brute force alone. It was about courage, ingenuity, and the willingness to act decisively when the moment called for it. And she, tied to a post just moments before, was ready to prove it. The clearing was alive with tension. Alara stood free at last, her hands untied, her mind sharp and focused. The rogue colonists no longer laughed. Fear and uncertainty had replaced their confidence. The creatures, once a looming threat, now moved with purpose, guided subtly by her and Kale. Every pulse of sound, every flicker of light from Kale's device was met with precise attention from the alien fauna. It was a delicate dance, but it was one humans were mastering. Alara's eyes scanned the clearing. The rogue colonists were scattered now, unsure of their next move. Their unity had collapsed under the pressure of unpredictability. Some tried to regroup, whispering urgent plans to each other. One reached for a stick, intending to assert dominance over the creatures again. But before he could act, a quadruped shifted its massive frame between him and Alara, its limbs steady and immovable. Its tendrils waved subtly, signaling caution. "You're not going anywhere," Alara said firmly, her voice carrying authority. She had learned to use words like tools. Calm, confident, commanding words often worked faster than physical strength. "Back up and stay where you are." Kale's device pulsed softly in response, amplifying her commands. The fungi surrounding the clearing shimmered with rhythmic light, almost like a heartbeat. The creatures responded to the combined signals of sight and sound, moving with coordinated intelligence. The rogue colonists' panic deepened. They shouted at each other, pointing at the creatures and at Alara. "This is impossible," one cried. "How is she controlling them?" Another shook his head, backing away from the nearest quadruped. "It's like they're listening to her." Alara ignored the fear in their voices. She focused on the next step, regaining complete control over the situation. The clearing had become a battlefield of wits, strategy, and subtle influence. Humans did not rely on brute force alone. They adapted, they calculated, and they acted with precision. That was their strength. She moved toward the nearest colonist slowly, deliberately. The quadrupeds flanked her, creating a natural barrier. Their eyes glowed softly, and they shifted their weight to block any sudden moves. The winged creatures perched nearby, wings folded, alert and ready. Alara's presence now commanded respect, not just from the colonists, but from the creatures as well. "You underestimated us," she said, her voice calm but firm. "You thought fear would control me. You were wrong. Intelligence, observation, and understanding are stronger than brute force." One of the colonists tried to step forward, but a quadruped lifted a tendril gently, nudging him back. He stumbled slightly and fell to the ground, bewildered. The others froze, realizing that the creatures were not mindless. They were guided, aware, and protective. Kale moved closer to Alara, activating the device in short, precise pulses. The light from the fungi responded, creating a pattern that resembled a shield around them. The creatures reacted instantly, forming a loose perimeter that confined the rogue colonists without harming them. Alara smiled slightly. The forest itself had become their ally. "Now," she said, focusing on the next part of her plan. "We need to disarm them calmly and carefully." She gestured to Kale. Together, they began coordinating movements. Alara took a step forward, and a quadruped mirrored her motion, shifting its weight to block the nearest colonist. Kale adjusted the device, sending a gentle pulse that guided the winged creatures to observe the remaining humans. The rogue colonists realized they were trapped, but not by brute force. They were trapped by human ingenuity, by understanding and control. Panic rippled through their ranks. One tried to shout to rally the others, but the creature's presence made even words feel powerless. Alara took a deep breath. Her next move required precision. She approached the first colonist slowly, making sure her steps were calm and deliberate. She wanted to show them that she was in control, but she also wanted to avoid any unnecessary aggression. "Sit down," she commanded, pointing at the ground. The quadrupeds shifted slightly, reinforcing the command with their presence. To the colonists' shock, the man hesitated, and then slowly, reluctantly, he sat. One by one, the others followed, realizing resistance would only provoke the creatures further. Alara's mind raced ahead. They had neutralized the immediate threat, but there was still work to be done. The rogue colonists were dangerous, and if left unchecked, they could regroup or escape. She needed to secure them until help arrived, or until she and Kale could escort them safely back to the colony. Kale gestured for her to follow. They moved together toward the center of the clearing, keeping the quadrupeds between themselves and the rogue colonists. The winged creatures followed overhead, their movements precise and calculated. Every element of the environment was being used to their advantage. As they reached the center, Alara noticed a faint movement in the tree line. Another creature, smaller and faster than the others, had been observing the entire encounter. She hummed softly, matching the rhythm she had used before. The creature paused, then stepped closer, its eyes reflecting trust. Kale adjusted the device, reinforcing the signal. The creature joined the formation, further securing the perimeter. The rogue colonists' fear was palpable now. They whispered frantically among themselves, trying to figure out what to do next. But every potential move was blocked by creatures that were no longer threats. They were allies. Humans had transformed danger into protection through understanding, observation, and calm action. Alara took a moment to breathe. She glanced at Kale. "We've got them," she said quietly, "but we need to be careful. They're desperate." Kale nodded. "Agreed. One wrong move and they'll panic, but I think they'll follow reason if we guide them carefully." Alara turned her attention back to the rogue colonists. She needed to communicate clearly, assertively, without provoking unnecessary aggression. She raised her voice, calm and firm. "You will stay here," she said. "You will not move until we allow it. You are safe if you comply. The creatures will not harm you if you follow instructions, but any attempt to resist will be met with consequences, calculated, precise, and unavoidable." The colonists stared at her, their expressions a mixture of fear and disbelief. They had never encountered humans who could control situations like this without resorting to violence. They had underestimated the power of intellect, observation, and strategy. Alara allowed herself a small smile. This was the essence of HFY, humans thriving through intelligence, courage, and adaptability. Not by brute force, but by understanding the world around them and using it to survive and protect. She moved closer to the nearest colonist, her steps deliberate. The quadrupeds mirrored her movements, maintaining a protective barrier. The winged creatures adjusted their positions overhead, creating a web of watchfulness that made resistance impossible. "You will follow instructions," she repeated. "No sudden moves, stay calm. Everything will be fine if you cooperate." The colonists exchanged hesitant glances. One reached for a stick again, but a quadruped's tendril gently tapped it away. The man froze, realizing that aggression was futile. The creatures were aware, intelligent, and aligned with the humans. Alara turned her attention to Kale. "We need to get them out of the clearing," she said. "Slowly, carefully, one step at a time. The creatures will guide them, but we need to direct the process." Kale nodded, adjusting the device. The light pulses synchronized with Alara's humming, creating a rhythm that the creatures followed naturally. The quadrupeds began moving slowly toward the edge of the clearing, herding the rogue colonists like a shepherd guiding sheep. The winged creatures flitted above, ensuring no one strayed or attempted to escape. Alara stayed close to the center, observing every movement. Her experience with Kestrel 9's wildlife had taught her that patience and observation were as important as action. She guided the process with calm authority, using sound, motion, and subtle cues to direct both creatures and humans. The rogue colonists moved reluctantly, guided by the intelligent creatures and the humans' precise commands. Fear kept them compliant, but reason and logic also played a role. They began to understand, in a small way, the power of intelligence over aggression, of strategy over brute force. Finally, after what felt like hours but was only minutes, the rogue colonists reached the edge of the clearing. The quadrupeds positioned themselves strategically, ensuring no sudden moves could threaten Alara or Kale. The winged creatures settled overhead, vigilant but calm. Alara breathed a quiet sigh of relief. They had succeeded in turning the situation around, neutralizing the immediate threat without violence. The rogue colonists were trapped, controlled, and exposed, but unharmed. And more importantly, the creatures remained allies, responding to her signals and guidance rather than fear. Kale approached her, his eyes reflecting approval. "You handled that beautifully," he said. "Patience, observation, and calm, that's what it takes to survive here." Alara nodded. "And to thrive," she replied. "We've shown them and the creatures that humans are not helpless. We adapt, we learn, we lead." The clearing seemed to relax around them. The creatures returned to their positions naturally, guided by the same rhythms and patterns that had protected them throughout the encounter. The rogue colonists remained at the edge, subdued, their confidence shattered. Alara looked at the forest beyond the clearing. Kestrel 9 was a harsh, alien world, but it was also a place of opportunity. Humans could thrive here, not through dominance or violence, but through understanding, ingenuity, and courage. And she, along with Kale, had proven that. For the first time since she had been captured, she felt a deep sense of accomplishment. The immediate danger had passed, but the battle for control of the clearing, and perhaps the planet, was far from over. Humans had asserted their intelligence, their courage, and their ability to adapt. That was the essence of survival. That was the essence of HFY. And Alara knew, with certainty, that humanity would continue to thrive on Kestrel 9, one careful, intelligent step at a time. The clearing lay quiet under the soft glow of Kestrel 9's fungi. The rogue colonists crouched at the edges, uneasy and subdued, while the creatures, once threatening, stood alert and watchful. Alara's pulse was steady. She had survived the trap, freed herself, and guided the creatures into a position of strategic advantage. But this was far from over. The rogue colonists were cunning, desperate, and dangerous. They could regroup if given a moment's chance. Kale approached her quietly, adjusting the device strapped to his wrist. Its light pulses synchronized with the hum that Alara had learned to produce, creating a combined signal that the creatures responded to immediately. Quadrupeds shifted their positions subtly, winged creatures flitted above, and even the smaller, faster animals in the treeline responded to the rhythm. Together, humans and wildlife formed a coordinated force, ready to influence the situation with precision. Alara scanned the rogue colonists carefully. Their fear was evident, but some were beginning to exchange furtive glances, whispering among themselves. She could see the spark of rebellion in one's eyes, the same spark that had led to the creation of this trap in the first place. She needed to act decisively before their courage turned into action. "Kale," she whispered, We need to lead them out completely. They have to understand that control isn't about brute force. It's about awareness, intelligence, and consequences. Kale nodded. I'm ready. Let's do this carefully. One misstep and they'll panic, which could undo everything. Alara's plan formed in her mind. They would guide the rogue colonists out of the clearing and into a controlled area, where the creatures could contain them safely until colony authorities arrived. The forest itself would act as an ally, paths that favored human and creature coordination, natural barriers to prevent escape, and observation points to monitor every movement. She stepped forward, her voice calm and firm. "Follow me," she instructed. "Step carefully. No sudden moves. The path is safe if you cooperate." The colonists hesitated, uncertainty shadowing their faces. But when the quadrupeds adjusted their positions, subtly hurting them forward, compliance became the logical choice. Even their stubbornness had limits when faced with intelligent creatures and humans who had mastered the environment. Alara moved first, Kale beside her. Every step was deliberate. The quadrupeds flanked her, the winged creatures overhead keeping watch. The rogue colonists followed, a cautious line of humans being shepherded not by weapons, but by understanding and coordination. As they progressed, Alara observed their reactions carefully. Some shifted uneasily, glancing at the quadrupeds as though expecting them to attack. Others tried to whisper instructions to each other, but the presence of Kale's device and the synchronized hum created a subtle psychological influence, encouraging compliance without fear. The path narrowed, winding through dense underbrush. Fallen logs and glowing plants created natural obstacles, but Alara had memorized the terrain from previous explorations. She guided the group through, using small hand gestures to direct both the creatures and the humans. It was a dance of precision, patience, and subtle authority. One rogue colonist, braver, or perhaps more foolish, than the others attempted to bolt toward a narrow trail leading deeper into the forest. A quadruped immediately stepped in his path, tendrils raised in warning. The winged creatures swooped lower, creating a gentle but firm barrier. Alara stopped, looked him in the eye, and said firmly, "You will return to the line, now." The colonist froze. The creatures were aligned with her intent. They weren't attacking. They were enforcing her commands through awareness and positioning. Slowly, he stepped back, rejoining the line. The other rogue colonists whispered among themselves, realizing that any attempt at rebellion would be met with coordinated, intelligent opposition. Not violence, but consequences. Alara smiled slightly. This was the essence of human ingenuity, influence and guidance, intelligence over aggression. Humans could survive and even thrive in environments far more dangerous than this one, not through strength alone, but through understanding, adaptability, and strategy. Kale glanced at her and nodded, signaling agreement. They continued moving, slowly but steadily, leading the rogue colonists deeper into a section of the forest where natural barriers limited escape routes. Fallen trees, thick underbrush, and shallow streams created a maze-like environment that the creatures could navigate easily, but which would confuse anyone unfamiliar with the terrain. As they moved, Alara maintained her humming pattern, synchronized with Kale's device. The quadrupeds adjusted their positions seamlessly, forming a moving perimeter around the rogue colonists. The winged creatures monitored overhead, their sharp eyes ensuring that no one slipped past. Even the smaller creatures in the shadows responded to subtle cues, guiding and influencing the environment with their movements. The rogue colonists were becoming increasingly compliant, their confidence replaced by anxiety. They whispered frantically among themselves, but the logic of the situation was clear. Resistance was futile. The creatures were intelligent, the humans were coordinated, and the terrain favored the leaders. Alara paused briefly at a natural clearing where a small stream split the path ahead. She turned to the rogue colonists. "Step carefully," she instructed. "One misstep and you'll find yourselves in trouble." The colonists obeyed, moving cautiously across the shallow water. The quadrupeds flanked them, the winged creatures flew low to maintain oversight, and Kale adjusted the device to reinforce the signal. Every step was precise, every movement deliberate. Alara observed carefully. One rogue colonist whispered to another, trying to plan an escape, but the creatures responded instantly. A quadruped shifted, blocking the path, while a winged creature adjusted its flight, maintaining oversight. The humans realized that even subtle movements against her instructions were monitored. Intelligence, observation, and coordination had replaced fear as the controlling factor. The path continued, winding deeper into a controlled section of the forest. Ilara and Kale led the rogue colonists toward a natural amphitheater, a clearing surrounded by steep rocks and dense vegetation. This area was easy to secure, with only one accessible exit, which they could monitor. Once they arrived, Ilara signaled to the quadrupeds and winged creatures to form a perimeter. The rogue colonists hesitated at the edge, realizing that escape was now impossible without confrontation. Kale adjusted the device, pulsing light in a rhythmic pattern that reinforced compliance. Ilara stepped forward. "You are contained," she said. "Any attempt to escape or resist will be met with consequences. The creatures are intelligent, aware, and capable of following my guidance. You are safe if you comply, but you will not be allowed to act against me or this environment." The rogue colonists exchanged fearful glances. They realized that the humans had turned what they had intended as a trap into a controlled situation. Their own plan had failed, not because of brute force, but because humans could think, adapt, and lead with intelligence. Ilara turned to Kale. "We need to ensure they remain here until the colony authorities arrive. The perimeter is secure, but I want to maintain control until help arrives." Kale nodded. "Agreed. The creatures are compliant and the environment favors us. We just need to maintain the signal and keep them calm." They worked together, guiding the quadrupeds and winged creatures to positions that ensured complete oversight. Every exit was covered, every potential movement monitored. The rogue colonists were now contained, unable to resist or escape. Ilara allowed herself a moment to reflect. Humans were remarkable in their ability to adapt, to survive, and to thrive. On Kestrel 9, she had demonstrated that intelligence, strategy, and courage were more powerful than brute force. The rogue colonists had been stopped without injury, not through violence, but through understanding, coordination, and careful action. Kale spoke quietly. "You've changed the game here, they'll remember this. Humans don't just survive, they influence, adapt, and control without harming unnecessarily." Ilara nodded. "That's the point. Survival isn't about fighting blindly, it's about awareness, strategy, and courage. That's what makes humans strong." The rogue colonists watched in silence, their pride broken, their confidence shattered. They had underestimated humans, underestimated the creatures, and underestimated the environment. Every miscalculation had been exploited by Ilara and Kale, using observation, intelligence, and patience as their weapons. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the clearing, Ilara felt a deep sense of accomplishment. The immediate threat was neutralized. The rogue colonists were contained. The creatures were aligned with their intent, and humans had once again proven their adaptability, ingenuity, and courage. But Ilara knew the challenge was not fully over. The colony authorities would need to secure the rogue colonists, and she and Kale would need to ensure that the creatures returned safely to their natural habitat. Every step required careful planning, observation, and patience. Yet for now, the clearing was under control. Humans had turned danger into safety, threats into allies, and fear into respect. Ilara allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. Kestrel 9 was harsh, alien, and unpredictable, but humans were capable of more than brute strength. They could think, adapt, and lead in ways that no force of nature or rogue colonist could match. And with that realization, she felt a surge of pride and hope. Humans would survive here, humans would thrive. And no challenge, no matter how unexpected or dangerous, could diminish their ingenuity, courage, or determination. The forest of Kestrel 9 was quiet now, bathed in the soft glow of bioluminescent plants. The rogue colonists remained contained in the natural amphitheater, flanked by the intelligent quadrupeds and observed by the vigilant winged creatures. Ilara stood beside Kale, her chest rising and falling steadily, the calm in her mind a contrast to the chaos that had erupted hours before. The clearing, once a trap, was now a symbol of human adaptability, courage, and ingenuity. Ilara surveyed the scene. The rogue colonists had learned a painful lesson. Intelligence, observation, and strategy outweighed aggression. They had underestimated humans, and that mistake had brought them here, contained, powerless to interfere, and fully aware that brute force alone could not prevail. Kale adjusted the device on his wrist, sending gentle pulses to maintain the coordination with the creatures. The quadrupeds subtly shifted positions, forming a perimeter that left no room for escape. The winged creatures hovered overhead, eyes gleaming in the faint light. Even the smaller animals, once hidden in the shadows, moved into positions that reinforced the perimeter. Humans and creatures had become a synchronized force, a living demonstration of adaptability and intelligence in action. Alara's mind, however, was already moving beyond the immediate moment. "We need to ensure the colonists remain contained until authorities arrive," she said. "The creatures are compliant, but we can't leave the situation unattended. We've neutralized the immediate threat, but full resolution requires coordination with the colony." Kale nodded. "I'll maintain the signals and guide the creatures. Your presence is key for the colonists. They need to understand that compliance is safer than resistance." Alara turned her attention to the rogue colonists. Some of them were still in shock, their faces pale as they took in the full extent of what had just happened. Their whispers had grown quiet, replaced by a realization of their helplessness. Alara's calm, authoritative presence reinforced the understanding that resistance was futile. They had been trapped without a single act of violence against them, a lesson in the strength of intelligence over aggression. "You will remain here," Alara instructed, her voice steady and firm. "You are safe if you comply. Any attempt to escape will be met with controlled consequences. The creatures will not harm you unnecessarily, but they will respond to any sudden aggression. Do you understand?" The rogue colonists hesitated, then slowly nodded. They had no choice but to comply. Every escape route was monitored, every movement was anticipated, and the forest itself, guided by human ingenuity, reinforced the containment. Alara felt a surge of pride. Humans had survived and prevailed on Kestrel 9 not through weapons, but through understanding, strategy, and patience. Every calculation, every observation, and every subtle action had contributed to their triumph. This was the essence of HFY, the ability to thrive through intellect, courage, and adaptability, even in the face of alien dangers. Kale gestured to the quadrupeds, prompting them to shift slightly, ensuring the rogue colonists remained fully contained. "It's remarkable," he said quietly. "They follow our guidance without fear, without aggression. It's cooperation based on understanding, not dominance." Alara nodded. "That's the key," she replied. "We respect their nature and they respect ours. Humans don't need to destroy to survive. We adapt, we influence, we lead." The rogue colonists glanced around, their expressions a mix of awe and fear. They had witnessed firsthand that humans could assert control and ensure safety without violence. Alara and Kale had demonstrated that intelligence, observation, and careful coordination could achieve what brute strength could not. The lesson was clear, and it would not be forgotten. As they waited, the forest itself seemed to settle. The creatures relaxed slightly, returning to natural postures, though still attentive to Alara and Kale's guidance. The quadrupeds shifted from defensive positions to watchful ones, and the winged creatures perched lightly overhead, their glowing eyes scanning the clearing. The forest had become an ally, responding to human ingenuity and strategy rather than hostility. Alara glanced at Kale. "We've done more than survive," she said. "We've shown them what humans are capable of." Kale smiled faintly. "Yes. Intelligence, courage, adaptability, those are our strengths, and we've proven it today." A soft rustle in the underbrush caught Alara's attention. The creatures she had guided through the clearing responded instantly, shifting in position and observing. Even in her calm, she remained vigilant. Kestrel 9 was a wild planet, full of surprises, and the balance of nature demanded respect. Humans had survived because they understood that, and they had leveraged it to their advantage. Alara approached the rogue colonists slowly, maintaining a calm but commanding presence. "You will remain here until the colony authorities arrive," she instructed. "You will cooperate and you will learn from this experience. The creatures will not harm you unnecessarily, but your safety depends on compliance. Understand?" They nodded, subdued. Their confidence had been replaced by respect for intelligence and strategy. They understood that resistance was futile, and that human ingenuity had shaped the outcome without the need for violence. Kale joined her, and together they began a final sweep of the clearing. The quadrupeds moved in perfect synchronization, reinforcing the perimeter, while the winged creatures adjusted their positions overhead. The smaller animals in the shadows observed attentively, responding to subtle cues from Kale's device. Every element of the environment was aligned with human strategy, a living demonstration of the power of observation and adaptability. As the minutes passed, Alara reflected on the journey. She had been trapped, tied to a post, facing both rogue colonists and unfamiliar creatures. Yet through patience, intelligence, and courage, she had turned the situation completely around. Humans had survived, prevailed, and influenced their environment without resorting to brute force. This was the true strength of humanity: adaptability, strategy, and moral authority. Finally, a distant signal reached them. The colony authorities were on their way. Rescue and formal containment were imminent. The rogue colonists would face the consequences of their actions, but not through immediate violence. They would learn that intelligence, courage, and cooperation were more powerful than aggression. Alara turned to Kale. "It's almost over," she said softly. "We've maintained control, ensured safety, and proven that humans can thrive here." Kale nodded. "Yes, and we've done it without unnecessary harm. That's what matters most." The rogue colonists remained contained, watching as the humans prepared to secure the situation fully. Every movement was deliberate, every action calculated, every element of the environment leveraged to ensure success. The forest had become a partner, the creatures allies, and humans the orchestrators of a controlled, safe outcome. Alara felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She had faced fear, danger, and unpredictability, and emerged not only alive but triumphant. Humanity had proven its intelligence, courage, and adaptability on Kestrel 9. The rogue colonists had been neutralized without harm, the creatures guided and respected, and the forest understood as an environment to be worked with, not against. As the colony authorities arrived, taking charge of the rogue colonists, Alara and Kale stepped back. The creatures returned to their natural behaviors, observing the humans with trust rather than fear. The clearing, once a site of danger and potential injury, was now a testament to human capability. Alara breathed deeply, feeling the weight of the moment. Humans had survived, humans had adapted, humans had triumphed. And in that triumph lay the essence of HFY: human ingenuity, courage, and moral strength, shining brightly even on an alien, unforgiving world. Kale looked at her with a faint smile. "You've proven today what I've always believed," he said. "Humans don't just survive. We thrive through thought, courage, and understanding." Alara nodded, gazing at the forest around them. "And we will continue to thrive," she said. "On Kestrel 9 and anywhere else humans go, intelligence, adaptability, and courage are what make us strong. And we will never forget that." The rogue colonists were escorted away, subdued but unharmed, while Alara and Kale remained in the clearing, observing the creatures as they returned to their routines. The quadrupeds wandered back into the forest, the winged creatures took flight, and the smaller animals disappeared into the underbrush. Humans had influenced the environment, guided it safely, and demonstrated that intelligence could prevail without destruction. Alara turned to Kale, feeling a sense of quiet triumph. "We've proven it," she said. "Humans are capable of anything, even on a world as strange and dangerous as this. We survive, we adapt, and we lead." Kale smiled. "And that's what makes humans extraordinary." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long, golden shadows across the clearing, Alara felt hope swell in her chest. Kestrel 9 was a wild, unpredictable planet, but humans had claimed their place here, not through violence, but through intelligence, courage, and adaptability. They had faced danger, uncertainty, and fear, and had triumphed. This was humanity at its best. Observant, intelligent, courageous, and capable of thriving anywhere. The forest was no longer a threat but a partner, the creatures no longer enemies but allies, and the rogue colonists no longer a threat but a testament to human strategy and patience. Alara took a deep breath, feeling the essence of the moment. Humans had triumphed, and the lessons of the clearing would remain. That intelligence, courage, and adaptability were stronger than aggression, stronger than fear, and stronger than brute force. And as night fell over Kestrel 9, the clearing stood as a silent testament to humanity's greatest strength: the ability to survive, adapt, and thrive anywhere, even in the face of alien worlds and unpredictable challenges.